And so from an internal marketing perspective, you're essentially saying, this is the reason this is a good place to work. And here's some examples, or here's some promotions of things that people have done that are amazing. Or this is where there's a center of excellence. That's a place, right? Price. This is the benefits we're gaining from doing this really well in this part of the business. So when we think about how businesses perform, often it comes down to a communication challenge or great communication. So bad performance is generally linked to poor communication. Good performance is generally linked to good communication. So from my perspective, one of the things that everything we do in my practice and in our company is based around conversations. And those conversations are designed to help people gain vision and understanding and clarity and agility. And all of that is essentially a marketing message. Here's where we're going. This is the dream that we're shooting for.
Welcome to the Internal Marketing Podcast, the unique podcast series that flips the marketing conversation from external to internal, exploring all the ways that companies can build the brand and drive growth by engaging and empowering its employees to become powerful ambassadors of the company brand. I'm your host, Kerry-Ann Stimson, and I'm very happy to bring you this episode where we'll be talking about how internal marketing can improve the way that your teams work. But first, this season's sponsor is Workshop, the number one email tool for internal communications. They created an incredible weekly newsletter for marketing and comms professionals called the Happy Monday Club. If you're looking for more practical resources and powerful perspectives about leveraging the power of internal marketing, then this is absolutely the newsletter for you. Every Monday, the Workshop team puts together an inspiring list of articles from some of the world's top workplaces, the latest internal comms templates, and the occasional giveaway or surprise. Join over 30,000 comms and marketing professionals and sign up now at happymondayclub.com. Now, let's jump into this conversation with my featured guest, Jimmy Burroughes. Jimmy is the founder and CEO of JB Leadership, and he'll be sharing about how internal marketing can improve the way that your teams work. Hi, Jimmy. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to the Internal Marketing Podcast. It's great to have you.
Kerry-Ann, it's a privilege to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. And you know what? I'm very excited about this conversation because I believe I can go out on a limb and say that it's the very first time I'm having this kind of conversation on this podcast series, and I'll let my wonderful viewers and listeners know why. So, of course, this is the Internal Marketing Podcast, and as far as I'm aware, it's still a very uniquely focused podcast because we talk about all things internal marketing, which is really engaging and empowering employees to become powerful advocates of the company brand and also to support them and enable them and empower them ultimately to deliver on the brand promise to the customer. But since we've been running this podcast for a few seasons now, we've really just focused mainly on the brand advocacy component, right? But for this conversation today, we're going to take a bit of a pivot. And I think that's why you're the best person to have this conversation with, because ultimately, we want to look at that other side of internal marketing that speaks to how do we engage our employees in a way that supports how we work as an organization, how employees work together, work with leadership, work laterally, and of course, ultimately, how does that impact operations, output, and of course, the bottom line, which is why anybody's in business. So Jimmy, first of all, could you kind of just kick us off as to why have you taken up this area of focus as something that you believe leaders listening to a podcast like this need to even care about?
If I think back to most of my career, it's always been in relatively high pressure leadership roles. My first job out of university was the Second Gulf War, and I was a junior army officer in Basra, responsible for
Wow.
logistic resupply in a war zone. And that continued
Mm.
for a few years in various different theaters, doing sort of relatively challenging jobs. And you're always moving into a job where you're challenged and having to grow and learn to achieve a great outcome. But it comes with a certain amount of pressure. And then when I left the military and I joined the corporate world, I was always being promoted reasonably quickly from sort of a graduate level role. I ended up in a global role, and so I was 15 years younger than most people around the leadership table, and constantly
Wow.
feeling like
Okay.
that need to prove myself and the need to be, a high performer, and no matter what I did. And the army's really great at teaching you that it pays to be a winner and it sucks to be a loser. So I was always trying to be the winner, no matter what it was. And unfortunately, over the course of a few years working in that GM role, lots of things were going on in my life at the same time. I was doing an MBA, I was doing this GM role, which required lots and lots of travel and hotels and meetings and conferences overseas. Unfortunately, I was in an unstable relationship, which meant that that was an additional strain. Renovating a house, and as you can imagine, sort of stacking up the things that were starting to take a bit of an emotional toll on me.
Yes,
And then
indeed.
I think the straw that broke the camel's back was a legislative change in New Zealand, where I was living at the time, that essentially meant that half of our bottom line, and we're talking an eight-figure business, so tens of millions of dollars just disappeared overnight, and the expectation was given back to me. We'll find a way of fixing it. And so, of course, I was trying to rally to the cause, but the reality of it was I was already pretty tired. I was already struggling to wake up in the morning, see the point in what I was doing, and to get to work. And I didn't see the purpose of the stuff we were doing. It was kind of lost behind politics and meetings and problem solving and whack a mole. And so I burned out. And that burnout really affected me in 2017, so much so that I had to leave work. I ended that relationship. I left the house. I ended up moving back in with mum and dad for a while and kind of doing a bit of a regain on my life. At the same time, I started talking to other people who were traditionally high performers. They were executives and leaders of organizations, and they were burning out. And the more people I spoke to, the more people I found there were some sort of common patterns around high performers who burn out. There's a thing here. And then over the next couple of years, I was asked to start coming into organizations and supporting them to stop that happening. So, how do we create high performance cultures without burning our people out? How do we get more productivity and business results without melting our people or losing our people or them having problems? And
Yes,
how do we do
indeed.
this in a way that hasn't been done before? Because we've tried the high performance sports techniques, we've tried leadership programs, we've tried pushing people harder with goals and KPIs, and that stuff just isn't working right now. And this was all happening in the middle of COVID. And I got some great opportunities to work with some incredible global organizations who were doubling down on cultural change. And so the book came about through having done these sessions hundreds of times with various organizations, working out which were the conversations that really started to make a difference between managers and their teams, teams and teams, people within teams, and how could we systemize or create a framework that people could follow. And so the book was really taking all of that 5 years of research from my own burnout through those conversations, through those consulting engagements, and distilling it down into the five things that make a difference to help a business build a high performance culture, which is going to generate greater business results. And it just so happens that one of them is quite relevant to your world, which is the world of internal marketing, brand advocacy, and employee engagement.
It continues to baffle me a little bit because we know that internal marketing is something that it's a nomenclature that that has existed for quite a few decades now. But you perhaps you'll agree that I don't believe that it gets the focus that it deserves, right? And I mean, in your experience, why do you think that is? I love to talk to folks like you who are in the business world and even in the non-business world, but you see it coming up time and time again. But yet, perhaps if we were to read all of the wonderful articles by the great publications, or even just a nice walk on LinkedIn, it doesn't get the focus that it deserves. Why do you think
Mm.
that is?
I gave this some thought when we had our initial conversation, and my genuine belief is that people call the same thing different things. And so, from an internal marketing perspective, we're calling it brand advocacy. From an HR perspective, we're calling it employee engagement or employer brand proposition or employee value proposition. From a business perspective, we're talking about how our people deliver results because they're engaged, because they're happy, because they're highly productive, because they're supported. And so my sense is that we're all kind of talking about the same concept. We're looking at the same thing, but we've all got different perspectives on what it's called and what it looks like. And the analogy I always use is if I ask you to think about an apple, and everybody who's listening, if you think about an apple, well, some of you will have seen a beautiful green apple on a tree. For some of you, it'll have been red. For some of you, you'll have seen the apple symbol. For some of you, it'll have been a silhouette. For some of you, it'll have been the outline. It might have been a cartoon. We're all thinking about an apple, but we all have a slightly different view of what that apple is. And I think it's the same with this discipline. I come at it from a people and high performance culture perspective, but I'm working very hard to achieve the same business metrics and outcomes as your audience and the work that you do in terms of internal marketing and brand advocacy. I just have a different name for it.
In your experience, your research, your perspective, how does internal marketing support performance? Because as I started out at the top of this, we typically talk about internal marketing purely from the context of brand advocacy, which is more about tending to be sales, revenue generation, lead generation, conversion. But you're also focusing on it from the perspective of performance. So in your
Mhm.
experience, how does internal marketing help to drive great performance?
The reality though of marketing is to get a message across clearly. It's to communicate. And whatever you're communicating about your product or your service or your employee offering. And so, from an internal marketing perspective, you're essentially saying, this is the reason this is a good place to work. And here's some examples, or here's some promotions of things that people have done that are amazing. Or this is where there's a center of excellence. That's a place, right? Price. This is the benefits we're gaining from doing this really well in this part of the business. So, when we think about how businesses perform, often it comes down to a communication challenge or great communication. So bad performance is generally linked to poor communication. Good performance is generally linked to good communication. So from my perspective, one of the things that everything we do in my practice in our company is based around conversations. And those conversations are designed to help people gain vision and understanding and clarity and agility. And all of that is essentially a marketing message. Here's where we're going. This is the dream that we're shooting for. And this is why we're doing it and your role in it and the bigger context. We've got some understanding. Clarity. These are the things we're going to do that are going to make it happen. And agility. Well, there's going to be some bumps in the road, but if we equip you well enough and we support you well enough, then we'll make sure that you can surf that wave and not drown in it. They're good marketing tactics, right? They're good things to get your customers on board and to sign them up to things. And so I say we're all thinking about the same stuff. Performance comes from having great conversations with your people, making sure they know what they're doing and why, making sure that they're supported and you connect with them often, and making sure that when they fall over, you pick them up, dust them off, and you either do a case study analysis of it with them, lessons learned activity, or you help them to understand where maybe they fell over and why, and you help them move through it. Well, that's a good marketing promotion, post promotion analysis process.
Yes, indeed. And I'm glad that you mentioned even just talking about our customers because, again, in the whole internal marketing conversation, we spend so much and invest so much time, energy, resources, other financial resources in onboarding and engaging our customers to build that emotional connection. And hardly enough of those same resources with our people. But obviously, as you're sharing, there's some awesome benefits involved if we do that. And I'd love to get your perspective now on that whole matter of connection, because one of the things that, of course, marketing does is to build that emotional connection to what it is you're trying to market. So for customers, we're trying to get them to build an emotional connection with a brand in a way that helps to reshape their behavior, which is usually not just loyalty, but to get them to buy from us, right? So,
Hmm.
in the same way, in the context of this discussion, it's building an emotional connection, I'm suspecting, with employees. And I'd love to get again, your experience, your insight into how internal marketing and your overall focus, how that drives to the heart of that piece of connection that we're trying to understand better as leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said something really beautiful there. It's creating an emotional connection with your customer in the hope that they'll buy something. And realistically, what we're doing is we're creating an emotional connection between the employee and the company, the employee and the team, the employee and their manager, in the hope that they'll stay buying, which is what spending their time with you, spending their energy with you. And ideally, we want a bigger share of the customer pocket, which is we want a bigger share of their engagement and effort. And so what we do in the idea of connection and what we unpack in the book is the four different types of connection that leaders can create. And I won't go into them in detail because we could be here for hours, but essentially the first one is we are tribal animals. We are used to being
Mhm.
part of a gang, a crew, a tribe, or whatever you want to call it. We like to be
Yes.
collective in a collective.
Yes,
And
indeed.
when we feel isolated from that connective, we feel unsafe. And that feeling of unsafety tends to make us fearful, creates that fight or flight response, makes us more anxious, and makes it harder to perform really, really well. And the great opportunity that most organizations are missing is they go through all this effort to recruit somebody and get them into the business. And then they go, cool, you're here. Thanks, Kerry-Ann. Day one, there's your laptop. Get on with it, and they don't go through the cultural assimilation, the cultural onboarding process to say, this is what it's like to work here. And this is your tribe. And these are the people that you're going to be working with. They can help you, they can support you. We don't do that cultural connection to the tribe. So then people after 6 months are feeling, well, I don't know anybody and I feel really isolated and I'm still struggling to get my head around this job. And I never get to meet with my manager. And I don't really know who the other people in the team are apart from we just work together. We don't have any kind of deeper connection than that. So I'm not emotionally invested here. And then somebody else says, oh, hey, well, we've got a job over here for $10,000 a year more. Would you like to jump? Of course, they're going to jump. So there's no stickiness in the relationship. So that's the first piece of connection. The second piece of connection is that connection between you and your new employee. So again, we want them to be advocates for your team, and we also want you to advocate for them. So we have to go through a process of what we call building trust and connection. But it's essentially, how do I get them to trust me, and how do I dig a little bit deeper than, well, I'm your boss and you're my employee and I give you tasks. How do we go deeper than that? And for some leaders, that's really easy. It's a natural kind of process of just getting to know you. For other leaders, it can be really uncomfortable to be vulnerable and talk about family stuff and personal stuff and what they do outside of work. And trust comes from humanity. One of the phrases we use is connect with the person, not the position. And so we need to, for leaders to connect with the person at a personal level. So my name's Jimmy and I'm a scuba diver and I have a dog and I live in Mexico and these are my personal things. Oh, and I happen to run a high performance culture business, but that's not my job is not me. I'm a person. And when you are trying to connect with people in marketing, you're trying to connect with an emotion or a feeling or a sensation. You're not connecting with their intellect. So we want to do the same thing with humans. The third connection point is connecting networks. So helping your people to grow their network and to understand how
Yes.
what they do is making a difference in the plan. So
Mhm.
often one of the reasons people leave or don't perform initially and then leave a business because they're like, I don't really see the point in what we're doing. I don't really see how it's making a difference. And I work hard, yeah, but for what? What's the point?
Yeah.
And so we have to have a message that we can share with people to say, well, you're making magic for us in this way. And can you see that? And can you hook your heart onto it? Because if you can't, then it's not going to work. That person's just going to go through the motions of, well, I'm only doing this job to pay my mortgage or to feed my dog or whatever it might be. The last connection is connection with growth. So we all, I think, from most people I've met, we all want to get better at stuff. We might not necessarily want promotions, but we'd like to make our job simpler or easier, more efficient. We might want to um, have to spend less time at the office because we're competent. But nearly all of us want to get better at stuff. And there'll be people in your team who are getting better to, I need enough skills to be able to do the job. There'll be people in the team who say, I want to get broader now. I understand the job, but I want to widen my experience. And there'll be people in the team saying, I want to get better by getting the next job, the promotion, your job, the job after your job. And so our job as a leader is to connect with them and find out what is it that you want based on where you're currently at in your career and how do I help you get there? And when we start to create these connections from a connection with the tribe, connection with the team and the plan, connection with the networks, and connecting with aspirations and development and growth, then we start to make those people really sticky to our organization. But we also unlock their potential. Instead of them going, I'm going through the motions, just turning up to work and I'm paying my mortgage, they're like, I'm going to work to do some really cool stuff and I'm really excited about it. And I tell all my friends about it. And, I'm sat around the dinner table at Christmas and like, oh, what are you doing, Jimmy? I'm like, I'm changing lives. Like I'm writing books. I'm changing the world right now. And people, that passion is infectious for people when you're a brand advocate.
That. But one of the things that I'm hearing come out, Jimmy, is this whole aspect of building a great employer brand as an awesome outcome of what it is you're sharing. And of course, an employer brand being not just as a brand for the products and services that we offer to our customers, but an employer brand in terms of the brand. How are we seen and perceived by people, by employees who are either working with us already, so they'd want to stay, or to people who are looking for employment and see us as a great prospective employer? I mean, what's your take on what you're sharing as it pertains to how does it impact the employer brand, and why should leaders even begin to care?
Yeah, one of the things that's a consistent factor is we're really struggling to get good people. It's really hard to recruit right now. There's lack of
Yes,
talent in the
indeed.
market. There's all these kind of little phrases that keep coming up.
Mm.
And often the people, they've also struggling with high turnover. So this is people who join the business and then leave. And often one of the metrics that we look at is how many people, what percentage of people who join the business leave within the first year, the second year, the third year. So you start to see retention statistics. But can you imagine if we're now in a recruitment market where employees have options? And so if you and I are going out into the job market and having a look around, seeing what's out there, and you see a company who are like, yeah, you can come work for us. We make stuff and it's okay. We don't really have any benefits for you. Quite most of our people leave after a couple of years anyway. And yeah, we haven't really got anything else to say about that. Versus a company is like, so we're really driven by helping this community of people to achieve these amazing things. All of our people are passionate about it. And these are some examples that we can share with you. And you know what? People in our business stay because they get promoted, they get developed, we care about them, we look after them, and then we're like a big family of people. And we're not family in a cheesy cliche way. We're family because we actually try and make sure everybody gets home to their families every night. And if you join our business, we're going to make these commitments to you because we believe in you and we believe in your growth. I can ask you now, which one sounds like a business that you want to work for?
Oh,
You,
yeah.
right? And so a lot of the work that goes on from an internal marketing perspective is, well, how do we create that message and how do we partner up with our recruitment and talent functions to be able to share that externally through our brand proposition into recruitment adverts, into the way we position in the market, into the way that our external communications team shares messages about what it's like to work in this business and some of the wins we're having. Well, let's put our people at the center of that. Let's have some of our internal champions who are great advocates for our business fronting this stuff versus just wheeling out the CEO, who I'm sure is a wonderful person. But what about if you could have Fred, who's been in the business for 30 years because he lives and breathes this business, and he's the best person because he really connects with the audience because he's one of them, right? People tend to see sometimes the CEO is a bit elitist or lofty versus the lifer who's been in the business and has worked his way up from. I mean, this is the perfect example of Walmart, right? Doug McMillan, the CEO of Walmart, started in a
Yes.
store and he's worked his
Mm.
way up and he's got such credibility and such kudos. But they still also make sure that people from the store are getting showcased. So I think it's so important for internal marketing teams to really work on how do we help our people see the value that we have. And let me just give me one more piece actually before I close that piece.
Yes, please.
One of the big challenges that we see in organizations when it comes to engagement is our employees just don't know what the company's doing for them. I did a really interesting project with a large electronics manufacturer from Korea a while back, about a year and a half ago. And they had really high turnover. And when we started doing the exit interviews and the engagement interviews and trying to understand what's getting in the way of them having a high performance culture, there was this great belief of, well, there's nothing here for me. Like, nobody cares about me. There's no benefits. There's nothing. And we went to the HR team and we said, well,
Mm.
what are you offering? And they were like, well, we've got, it's almost like the medieval scroll. We've got these things. And there was like this long list of stuff, and it was great stuff. And we said, well, how do people find out about that? Or they go to our intranet site. Okay, well, how many people have actually been in your intranet site in the last 12 to 18 months? Oh, like 400. And this is a business of 60, 70,000 people. And I said, well, so we've got a messaging problem. I've got a communications problem. And when we said to some of these people in the engagement interviews, were you aware that there's this amazing access to, funding for study and sabbatical funding and grants, and there's all sorts of amazing things that you can do through this business. And they were like, no, we didn't even know about it. So our internal marketing team has a great role to play in sharing
Yes.
what are the promotions and what are the opportunities and what are the products that are available. If you're an employee here,
Yes.
these are the things you can have. And this is what we're going to do for you. And this is the difference it's going to make. And here's some stories of people who've used it, and them telling third party advocacy, them saying great things about it.
It's like really the need to have great internal PR, So are you doing a great job of doing your own PR internally, so that people know? Because it goes back to one of the four P's that we spoke about earlier, which is product. The product that you're
Mhm.
offering is the job. It's the job with this company. And if your clients, which in this case is your employees, if they don't know how great your product is, then they're not going to buy it. They're not going to believe in it. They're not going to be loyal to it. They're just not going to buy it. Just wonderful stuff. Jimmy, I'm sure there are some folks listening who are probably curious. So they like what they're hearing. They understand that the obvious benefit between making sure that the kind of internal marketing that drives the kind of connection that we need to see happening is in place, so that we get the outcome that we seek, advocacy, performance, etc. But I'm sure they're probably asking the question, well, how do I know if I even have a problem in my company where this is concerned? How do leaders take a look at what's happening inside of their organization to determine whether or not they have a challenge in this area to begin with?
Yeah, I'll come at it from two different angles. There's like the quick fix and then the slightly longer strategic one. The quick fix is actually an Amazon trick. And the what they do is the senior manager will come to the office or the warehouse or whatever it is with two pizzas or enough pizzas to feed the team. And they'll pop those pizzas in the break room or the lunch room, or the equivalent space of whatever it is, and they'll see what happens. And if people go, oh my God, guys, pizzas, come on, everybody has pizzas, and they all sit down around the table and they eat the pizzas together and they talk, then they
Woo-hoo.
know that that's a pretty good team culture in that place. If nobody turns up or people kind of grab the pizza and run, then they know there's some opportunity to do a bit more investigation. But it's a very simple, and
Ah,
it doesn't have to be pizza, okay? It can be hot
right.
dogs or barbecue or whatever, but you know what I mean? You're
A
creating
treat. Yeah.
this opportunity for people to connect. And if they're connecting, then they will connect. If they're disconnected, they won't connect. So that's the really simple one. That if you're a leader and you're thinking, I really want to just see where I might not know, I might not be aware of where my team is at, then you can do the pizza test. The more strategic version of this is starting to look at data. So if your organization is doing an engagement survey, that's one really good data point. And depending on which engagement survey you're using and the structure and the questions of it, you can get some interesting stuff out of it. What tends to happen though with leadership teams is they look at the business data. So all of the rolled up data, they go, oh, on average, we're doing pretty well. The devil is in the detail in engagement data. So which teams
Yes.
specifically are highlights and lowlights? Are there any parts of our business, levels of our business, layers of our business, pieces of our business? So you getting somebody to do some slicing and dicing. And I can tell you now from what I'm seeing in the world of AI, you can get these reports now, chuck them into AI and say, analyze this and tell me some of the trends that are going on. And within seconds, you can get that data back. So it's not like a massive number crunching exercise. But again, employee engagement surveys are one very small piece of the puzzle, because Often, if you've got low engagement, only the engaged people will fill it in. So skews the data.
Yes.
I mean, most of us, how many surveys do you fill in anyway for customer satisfaction? Maybe 5% of people respond. So you're looking at a very small data set. So then you've got to go, okay, well, how do we think laterally around this? So then we start to look at things like, um, who are the managers who are getting our people promoted? And are there any talent farmers in our business? Who are the people who used to be high performers who have left the business or have suddenly stopped being high performers? So last year they were like our superstar. This year they're in the más o menos category.
Hmm.
How
Interesting.
long are people staying with our business? Has there been a sudden surge of people leaving? Are people constantly leaving? Are people leaving within the first 3 months? Or is there a window of time where people are leaving? And is it just before promotions or bonuses? What's the data telling us there? Um, how are our absentee figures? Are we suddenly seeing a spike in people not turning up to work? Are we seeing a spike in health and safety incidents? Are we seeing a spike in disciplinary incidents? So people fighting at work or doing things that they shouldn't be doing at work? And when you start to get all of these pieces of data and you kind of zoom out a little bit and look at the whole picture, then you start to get a really good insight into what's happening culturally in our organization. Another very tactical one is who's having one-to-ones. You could literally survey monkey your entire staff and go, how long was it since you had a really meaningful conversation with your manager? 0 to 1 days, a week, a month, a year, never.
Ooh.
Um, and we know from the work that we do that the ideal connection with your employee should be 10 to 15 minutes once a week per employee. So if you're a manager with 10 people, 10 to 15 minutes with each 10 of them every week. Now, this is not a sit down across the table grilling on work in progress. This is a, hey, Kerry-Ann, how's things for you? What are you working on right now? What are you excited about right now? What's happening at the weekend for you? Oh, that thing you were working on a couple of weeks ago to try and get your house painted because your aunt's coming to stay. How's that? It's one of those conversations. So it could be, let's go for a walk. Let's grab lunch together. Let me drop you a text. Let's do it in the team meeting so we all find out what everybody's up to. But there's that, approximately 10 to 15 minutes per week per employee of human connection time really starts to shift culture. And then the final one is how vulnerable is the leader with the team? So it's very difficult to measure vulnerability. It's a qualitative measure versus a quantitative measure. But if
Yes.
you were to say to the team, what do you know about your leader and do they share things with you? And are they speaking about personal experiences? Are they approachable? Are they trustworthy? And they go, not really. Then again, you've got an internal brand advocacy issue. They're not necessarily feeling connected to their manager or their team and they don't necessarily feel safe. And that's going to diminish potential performance.
Wow. I suspect we probably just stepped on a few toes with those suggested ways at looking at whether or not there is a problem. And you're so right, Jimmy, that sometimes we do the surveys, and I get it. We do need to continue to do them. Let's put that
Mm.
caveat in there. But there's some certain little things that we can look at and look out for, as you rightly pointed out. How many one-to-ones are taking place? Have we seen a change in performance up or down, in individuals, particularly those who are top performers, not anymore? I mean, there's so many little things that we can look at. The devil is in the details, as you say, that can really give us a sense of whether or not we do have a problem. No,
Mm.
I mean, I guess having done that assessment, Jimmy, and my next question, I'm just going to caveat that I know that the prescription has to suit the diagnosis.
Absolutely.
But I mean, what are some of the things that you think, just listening to this conversation, leaders should be implementing right away? Just to go back to their respective shops and say, look, these are some of the things that we need to start doing now. Yes, again, the caveat being that the prescription has to fit the diagnosis, but there must be, I guess, some high level things that you suggest all team leaders make sure that they have in place to set the right foundation for the kind of engagement that drives connection and the outcome that we're trying to achieve as an organization.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I'll do some strategic stuff and some tactical stuff because we want practical
Sure.
things, but we also
Yes,
want some
please.
some game changing things.
Yes,
And
indeed.
we can use good marketing principles here again insofar that, the days of the sheep dip marketing or the mail blast or the whatever it is, the mass marketing doesn't really work, doesn't really connect. And amazingly, the same thing doesn't work for people in their employment either. So there is no like one size fits all. If you want to shift the culture of your business, give everybody $100. It doesn't work like that. Um, wouldn't it be easy if it did? And the reality is that and I'll go back to that phrase I used earlier, we need to connect with the person, not the position.
Yes.
So the tactical level things would be literally sitting down with each of your team members over a period of a few months and just getting to know them and letting them get to know you. And that's the key point. There's a really fascinating piece of research which talks about the concept of a vulnerability loop, and vulnerability loops build trust. And it's essentially, I'm going to say something that's going to make you see that I'm being vulnerable. You're going to respond in kind, and gradually we'll deepen our relationship. And for some leaders, that can be very difficult to be vulnerable. And they're thinking, oh my God, is this trust falls? And, is this like, I've got to share my deepest, darkest secrets? No. A really nice dip your toe in the water vulnerability starter
Yes.
could be, what have I missed here? Is there anything I haven't thought about? Who can build on what I've just shared? They are great vulnerability triggers that help your team to start getting to know you a little bit. Also, just being open about some of the personal things in life. And depending on your cultural context, that's more or less comfortable. But just saying, oh, I've been spending time with my kids this weekend, or I really enjoy doing this. When I was a GM, sometimes I didn't share a lot about my personal life. And as I started to, bring my dog to work, for example, people saw a different side of me. So that's not
Yes.
suggesting you should bring
Yes.
your dog to work if you're not allowed to, but it's that share a little bit of you and your personality. Be a person, not the boss. Um, the other tactical level thing is kind of linked to that. The vulnerability piece is, for many leaders, they feel like they have to be the expert with all the answers and solve all the problems, and that their status and success and performance is going to be judged by the fact that they are the number one. And as you move up through an organization, actually it becomes far less about your expertise in a certain field and far more about your ability to harness the expertise of those around you. So if you're if you're the one who's like, I'm always the one who has to answer all the phone calls, all the problems, all that has to come up with all the solutions, is building the strategy alone, and nobody helps me, and I just have to tell those people to do everything, and they never do it quite how I want it. If that's kind of resonating as, oh my God, that's my frustration here, then chances are you've got an opportunity to involve your team by not being the expert. And it's something they teach you in military training is, um, here's the problem. Who's got ideas, guys and girls? Who's got some thoughts? What can we do? Throw your
Yes.
ideas at me. My job
Yes.
as the leader is to make the decision on what we're going to do and own that decision and try and maximize its chances of success. But if I've got, as a junior officer, you have 35 to 40 soldiers working for you who've probably got more experience than you have because you're new and they've been in the job for a while. And I'm the one who's coming up with all the ideas. Really? Wouldn't it be far better if I said, let's get 35 brains thinking about this? I'll work out which is the best idea from that stuff, and then I'll make a decision, and everybody would have been involved in that. And by doing that process, very simple process, who's got some ideas? Let's do a whiteboard exercise. Let's throw some stuff up on post-it notes. Throw your ideas at me. Bring them. Who's got, it doesn't matter. There's no bad ideas. Just throw them out there. And we can filter the ones that are going to be possibles. Immediately we're going much wider. We're increasing our chances of success. And suddenly our team starts to think, oh, my boss wants my opinion. They want my perspective. They want me to share some stuff. They want me to speak up. They want me to share my opinions. And oh my goodness, maybe I have got something worthwhile saying. And next time round, I might go, hey, boss, I don't think this is working. I'm going to put my hand up and tell you that versus just keeping quiet
Yes.
because the boss is always in command. So they're the kind
Mhm.
of two really tactical things. The more strategic thing is really starting to work with your, um, starting to think as an enterprise leader. When you get to a certain level of an organization, you're not in marketing or in HR or in IT. You need to start thinking horizontally through the organization. So starting to build your network across the organization to build relationship bank accounts with those peers that you have at the same level of you. So functional leads or business unit leads or executive leads, because it becomes far more about how do you make outcomes happen by leveraging multiple resources. So in our instance, in for the context of this podcast, how do we create brand advocates in our business? Well, that's going to require some HR people to come in and give us some data on are our people brand advocates right now. It's going to require some internal marketing people to do some analysis on that and to work out what should our key messages be that we're going to promote our internal advocacy program with, and maybe to generate that. Require some comms people to copyright it. And it probably is going to require some sort of IT platform. And there's going to need to be some budget allocated. And we've got to work out how do we externalize this so it's contiguous with our employer brand, our internal brand, and our external brand look lined up. So we're not completely out of whack. And probably
Yes.
going to have to go to the executive as well to get signed off. So the strategic stuff is how do I start building this cross-functional internal brand advocacy capability by having some relationships in place with people who are going to be able to support that to get it over the line and who see the value in it and the value proposition that comes back from that. Are you struggling to recruit people? Are people not staying in your business? Are you always having to train new people? Are you always short of staff? If we could solve that, would you be happy? Cool. Well, this project can help with that. Do you want to get on board? And this is a strategic piece of work, which could take 6 to 18 months to create and deliver, but it will start to pay off.
Yes. And building that relationship bank. And I love the fact that you bring it right back down to creating that what's in it for me, that WIFM, as I like to
Hmm.
say, across the board. How does all of the functional areas benefit, from what it is we'd like to do and bringing everybody to the table to make it happen. I mean, Jimmy, this has just been an awesome conversation, and I feel like we could go on for hours talking about this stuff, but it's been so valuable, and I'd love to know from your perspective, what's that one key takeaway, that thought that you'd love our internal marketing tribe to come away with having heard everything you would have shared?
Um, I think I'll go back to connect with the person, not the position. This stuff comes down to human
Mm,
to human.
yes.
So if we can just do a better job on that, and the way all of our consulting proposition works is it should appear commonsensically easy. You know, it should appear so simple that like why is this guy making a living talking about things that are common sense? And my retort is always, if it's common sense, why are you not doing it? Well, because it's hard. So it's simple, but it's hard. So my job as a consultant and people, a person who works inside organizations is to say, how can we help you actually start to be achieving these commonsensically sensible things by making them a little bit easier for you? So connect with the person, not the position, is very much around just start to be a bit more human, have some better conversations. That would be the one gem I would leave, and happy to help if anybody's interested in a conversation about what that might look like.
Wonderful. Connect with the person, not the position. And you're right. If it were that common of a sense, then it would be happening more often than not. Jimmy, how can we, the internal marketing tribe, support you?
I guess the best way to support my business and my team and what we do is to share the stuff that we're doing. Um, we've obviously got this book that I'm super excited about, which is available through our website, jimmyburrows.com/book.
Yes. Could you
Uh,
remind us of the name of the book, please? Thank you.
yeah, the book is called Beat Burnout, Ignite Performance, the Leader's Playbook for Building a High Performance Culture. And it
All
is literally
right.
that. It's not a novel. It's a
Mm.
it's a almost like a recipe book for leaders to follow the steps inside, and that will help them turn burnout into high performance. So it's very, very simple. It's that whole premise of it's commonsensically easy. Let's make it easy to follow. So anybody who's interested in getting that and sharing it, please do. It's available on most digital formats. Um, the other piece that I would love support from is just the opportunity to connect with good people for a conversation. The work we do is driven around helping leaders have better conversations with their teams and their peers. And so if people want to have a conversation with us about how we do that, then I would be thrilled to connect with with people all across the world. We've got members of the team in all pockets of the world. I say I'm based in Mexico, but we work everywhere. And so don't feel limited that just because you're in a dim and distant corner of the world that we can't have a chat with you, because I love to have these conversations. As you can clearly see, I'm a bit of a nerd, and I really like to disconnect and talk about this stuff. And my goal always on these conversations is just to impart a little bit of the experience and some of the battle scars that I've had the opportunity to learn, so it doesn't have to happen to other people.
Wonderful. And what's the best way to connect with you, Jimmy?
Either through jimmyburrows.com or find me on LinkedIn, Jimmy Burrows.
Great. And we will leave those links in the show notes. So, Jimmy, thank you so very much for what has really been a very insightful, informative, and yes, even entertaining conversation with lots of great stories interwoven. It's been wonderful, Jimmy. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise, your experience with us. And on behalf of a grateful internal marketing tribe, wishing you all the very best in everything that you do.
Thanks, Kerry-Ann. Thank you so much for the opportunity again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Internal Marketing Podcast. I'm sure you got some great takeaways from this conversation. And if you haven't already subscribed to the Internal Marketing Podcast, then please join the tribe. And don't forget to leave a review and share this podcast with anyone whom you believe will find it valuable as well. I'm your host, Kerry-Ann Stimson, and I look forward to your joining me next time.